Everyone says getting jacked gives you confidence, but you train every single day and you still feel like you aren't worth anything. And here's why. I'm Jacob. I trained for 4 years. I managed to get my dream physique. And despite that, I still hated myself. And it wasn't until I learned a few important things that I managed to break that cycle. And I managed to do all of that without needing therapy and without needing anyone else to hold my hand during the journey. But before I show you what actually works, let me tell you a story so you know exactly how and why I struggled for years on end without making any progress. Let's paint a picture. This was Jacob around 20 years old, where all he wanted was to get jacked, get stronger, and get a 4-plate potato lift, 3-plate squat, and 2-plate bench. I remember going for a bushwalk, and all I could think about that entire bushwalk was what thing could I modify in my training so I can get stronger? How can I get that 4-plate deadlift? That was genuinely all I wanted at that point in my life. And I didn't know this at the time, but it was because deep down he felt unloved, low value, and full of self-doubt, with that constant narrative of I'm a failure, I'm inherently a failure, just playing through his mind without even realizing it. But in the gym, I felt alive. I felt amazing. I felt like a completely different person. I would be in the gym and I'd walk around like I'm fucking top shit. You know how it is. And then I'd go out of the gym and back to worthless Jacob. I literally had two different personas, I guess. I would come home and especially would hit hard late at night if I'm being stupid and not going to bed. Those feelings would rise up and they were not pleasant. But honestly, I just kind of pushed them down and forgot about them. Because it is much easier to just deny or push down or reject than it is to actually feel them. And nothing changed for years. I said earlier that I trained for 4 years without making any progress to my self-esteem. The first crack, probably the first beginning of genuine self-esteem change, was when I discovered shadow work, what that is, and then recently after I discovered that, I managed to put it directly into place in my own life. So I went on a holiday shortly after discovering that, where one of my friends was calling me an attention seeker. Deep down, whenever he would say this, I would react defensively, emotionally, irrationally, and I would try to call him a bad person because of it. It's basically just trying to defend my ego. Because long story short, deep down, I craved and needed validation from other people. That was where I got my self-worth from. So yes, I was an attention seeker. And because I rejected this part of myself, rejected the fact that I was an attention seeker, I was acting like an attention seeker, but I rejected this part of myself. Afterwards, I realized that those emotional and quick reactions was just me projecting and trying to defend my ego. So then I journaled and figured out, what is the root of it? What am I trying to defend? It was the part of me that needs validation from others, that I acted in a way to get validation. But I refused to acknowledge that. So again, I accepted that part of myself, acknowledged it, and I felt a slight bit better about myself after I did that. And that whole story made me realize one key distinction, that to make the change we want, we have to change our inner world and basically do inner work. It's not the changes in the external world that matters. More status isn't going to change how you feel deep down about yourself. So now for the actual advice. The first point is to make the distinction between the inner world and the outer world, and to not derive your self-esteem from outer world accomplishments or outer world things, anything external. You want to try and derive it internally. What's the inner world? It is your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your belief systems, your self-concept, who you think you are, everything deep down inside. And then the external world is obviously everything else: status, money, your physique, everything else. I know it's the standard advice. Don't derive meaning from external things. Wow, crazy. But you can... A good piece of advice that I've figured out over the last few years is you can consciously acknowledge something, but deep down, you don't embody or actually acknowledge that. You can logically understand, yeah, I don't want to derive value from external things. Makes sense to me. But are you still doing that? You probably are. You need to become aware of this shit. And on top of this, you want to solve inner world problems. Your self-esteem, all of the inner world problems about yourself that you deem to be problems. You want to solve that with inner work. Journaling, breath work, self-reflection, self-inquiry. You don't fix inner problems by reverting to or trying to fix it with external things. Again, getting more money, getting status, going to bad habits like alcohol, video games, and stuff like that, that isn't going to fix your problem. That is going to make it 10 times worse and make it blow up on you. No, it will blow up on you some point later down the line. Could be a year, could be 10 years. It's going to blow up on you. And it's going to manifest itself. You can't hide or try to break apart inner problems with outer shit. You just can't. Then building on this, you want to fix that negative self-talk. I remember I used to have, just thinking back on the thoughts I would have talking about myself, goddamn, I do not miss how I talked about myself. It's genuinely crazy comparing myself now to how I was. My inner dialogue was full of, I don't like myself. I'm not going to be able to do that. I can't do that. It's full of self-fulfilling prophecies of just negativity, of that I can't accomplish or do anything. Why, in God's name, I'm not religious at all, but why would you want your self-talk to be like that? Over and over, you're going to condition yourself to believe that. And that's not a good place for you to be in. Whenever you feel that negative spiral come up, just notice it and replace it with a question. What do I like about myself? What's there to be thankful for? Consciously replace it with a positive sentence instead. You can choose your own thoughts. You don't have to align with those negative thoughts. It's literally fully in your hands, in who you want to decide that you are. If you see a girl that you want to approach and you hear that thought in the back of your head, I'm not worthy, I can't, she's going to reject me. Why in God's name would you choose to listen to that? Why would you not want to replace it with, thoughts of I'm worthy, I can. This is going to work out. Even if it doesn't, I'm going to be fine regardless. Imagine two different people with those two different dialogues. No, imagine the same person with those two different dialogues twice over. Who do you think is going to approach? Who do you think is going to get their results? Who do you think is going to like themselves more? Consciously work on changing your self-talk. And now for the thing that really changed my life. It was removing and processing traumatic emotions. Basically, I heard a definition that trauma is basically unprocessed emotions, that something happened at some point in your life and you didn't process those emotions as it happened, so that those emotions now got stored deep inside of you as an impression that's now leaking energy and holding you back. And I found that this is very true. I had some deep shit regarding my family that once again, back to the shadow that I was talking about earlier, I accepted and pulled up those emotions. I fully processed those emotions, whether that was crying or breath work or journaling to myself or having a conversation with the younger Jacob. It was just processing the emotions that got stuck. And doing this, what a breath of fresh air. My body could instantly feel the changes. Within a few days after I processed these emotions, I would have low energy, low emotional capability. I didn't want to do anything. But after that energy had just fully expelled, I felt like the self-hatred, so much of the negativity just disappeared. My heart felt 20% lighter, like I was walking on air. I felt not physically lighter, but spiritually lighter, because I wasn't carrying around those emotions anymore. So I came up with an analogy to paint this and help you understand this. So imagine there's a sink with a faucet with some running water. Imagine the running water as the experience. You're having a negative experience right now. That's the faucet, the water coming out. And the water is being drained instantly. That is you processing the emotion. That is you having, for example, going through a breakup, crying about it, and journaling how you feel and doing shit about it. Or it's putting a plug in, not allowing the water to empty out or leave the system. It's just going to slowly build up now. It's now, instead of facing that breakup and those emotions, it's going to external things. It's going to video games and drinking yourself into an oblivion. And what's going to happen is those emotions, they're not going to be processed. They're just going to be stored there. That water's just going to be there. And it's going to drain your life force. That's the best way that I can explain it. It drains your life force and puts negativity on your self-concept, on the way you see yourself, on the way you feel inside. And that with each unprocessed emotion that gets stored, each traumatic, I'm going to call trauma as a general term for a negative experience that you happen that gets stored within. It doesn't have to be actually what one would think of trauma as. I'm not saying on YouTube, but you can probably guess what I mean by trauma. It's small things, like being neglected as a child. It's smaller things that you never processed that just get stored up, and it just saps your life force. And the more, I guess, emotional strength behind a unprocessed emotion, the more of a hindrance on your life force it would be. So those deep, traumatic emotions that you haven't processed, those are the biggest things that if you process those emotions, you're going to feel much better. And that's what I did. And I felt so much better. I can't believe this isn't talked about more. It actually saddens me that this isn't a more talked about subject in self-improvement or just anywhere. So to actually process emotions, first off, there's negative emotions as they're happening. For example, imagine you have an embarrassing moment and a week later, right now, you're thinking back on that embarrassing time, and in your body, you're feeling the shame, you're feeling the regret. Sorry, you're feeling the embarrassment deep down. And what do? You try to push it down. You try to logically explain it away. Do anything you can to avoid feeling that emotion, I guess. Instead, the alternative that is way better is to instead sit with an open heart. Literally, open yourself up to that emotion. Accept it. And let it flow through you. Don't let it get stuck as you've put a plug there. Let it flow through the drain. You don't want it getting stuck there. So you don't want to push it down or neglect it or rationalize it away. You want to accept it. It's like visualize a river that is constantly flowing. You want all of your emotions and the way you live your life to just be constantly flowing from one present moment to the next. You don't want to be in the past, feeling negative emotions, stuck on something. You just want to be a flowing river, just accepting the present as it is, without clinging to anything. Or even visualize a cloud in the sky. Clouds they go on by. They're here 1 minute, and then they're there, and then they're there, and then an hour later, they're gone. Visualize your emotions like that. You don't want to get stuck on them. They just want to flow on by. Just accept them. Open your heart. Open yourself up. It is a bit scary. No, it is not a bit. It is scary. But would you rather live in fear, in negativity, in no life energy? Or would you rather have this out of your system and you just live in the now? You're not worrying, you're not feeling like shit in your body. It just is. I know I've yapped on a lot about this, but I hope that you've taken a lot from this video. This shit is life-changing, and if you actually implement what I've said, your life's going to change. So yeah, I do appreciate you watching. Take care of yourself, mate. Subscribe. Bye-bye.